We promised you when we announced the Talking Politics TV summer break that we would be back with any major updates online. Today we have a big one. State Senator Sonia Chang-Díaz essentially ended her campaign for governor this morning, telling supporters she simply has no viable path to victory. But she is not stepping away altogether. Her name is still going to appear on the primary ballot in September, and she plans to spend the rest of the campaign season working to elect a slate of progressive legislative and district attorney hopefuls. But as it stands now, Attorney General Maura Healey is the presumptive Democratic nominee for the job and very likely the next governor of Massachusetts based on recent polling. Joining me to unpack all of this are Lisa Kashinsky, the author of Politico's Massachusetts Playbook, and Mike Deehan, co-author of the new daily newsletter from Axios Boston. Good to see you both. Lisa, let me start with you. Various members of the media were kibitzing before the announcement went down about what they thought it was going to be. Was she going to be getting out of the campaign? Was she going to be announcing a big new endorsement? Did you see this particular announcement coming or not?
You know, it's interesting because when she had sent out her campaign had sent out the press release the afternoon before, being like, big announcement that can change the course of this race. I mean, it set off everyone. The rumor mill was churning, and it was a lot of conversations of like, wow, this reads like something that she's ending her campaign. And then everyone, including myself, we all would second guess that and be like, you know, there's no necessary reason why she would drop out. Sure, her fundraising was lackluster. She was never going to be able to compete against Maura Healey on the air. You know, Healey had just put 4.5 million in ad buys, and Sonia barely had, 300 some odd thousand in the bank at the end of May. But yet everyone was like, maybe she is just trying to do a big push because she was the only candidate left. So people kept going back and forth. I kept going back and forth.
Yeah, same.
The intel I was getting was going back and forth. It was a confusing bit there.
Yesterday, I went to bed and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go cover Sonia Chang-Díaz dropping out of the race tomorrow. And then I was rereading the press release, which seemed like it was crafted in a way to keep us guessing or make us confused. And this morning I was like, no, it's going to be, Ayanna Pressley endorsing her campaign, or just what could it be? Mike, did you anticipate this, or were you flummoxed like Lisa and like me?
It was a very ambiguously worded press release, but that's the nature of almost all press releases. Just showing that around to some folks yesterday evening, kind of in the know a little bit more about politics, they said, "Oh, she's dropping out." It was pretty unanimous. People that knew her, people that know her campaign, they really realized that this is what was going to happen. I think a lot of that wording was to get the media to go to Jamaica Plain at 9 a.m. so that you could cover this, like you did, Adam.
And it worked.
That certainly worked. Getting out now in June, maybe we'll look back and see this as the smartest thing Sonia Chang-Diaz ever did as far as running for governor. If you look at the statement that Maura Healey put out later, it said that she wants to be a partner with Chang-Diaz. She wants to continue to work with her. So if there is some kind of angling here for Chang-Diaz to end up in the Healey administration, it's a little bit how we talk about presidential politics and primaries and people dropping out, supporting others in trade for something. We don't do that so much at the state level because it's rarer for politicians to join cabinets. But we could see Sonia Chang-Diaz as Secretary of Education or something like that, if that's the direction that Maura Healey wants to go when she's governor.
That's an interesting possibility that totally had not occurred to me. Were you guys struck like I was at the way you talked, Mike, about the nice things that Maura Healey said about Sonia Chang-Díaz? I was struck by the dearth of nice things that Sonia Chang-Díaz said about Maura Healey at the presser. She was given multiple chances to say, obviously we have different worldviews, but she's run a strong campaign, or words to that effect. And instead she said, I'll back whoever the Democratic nominee is. I'm keeping my name on the ballot, and I still think I'm the better candidate. Lisa, did that make you arch an eyebrow like it did with me?
Yes and no, because again, thinking kind of about presidential politics, as Mike said, you do see this from time to time. This was a hard race for Sonia Chang-Díaz. She'd been running for a year. She struggled again, with everything she did to get oxygen, get money, get endorsements. And yes, usually politicians do say nice things about their opponents when they drop out. But also with the inevitability around Maura Healey and knowing that, again, in the end, she and her supporters, if they want to see a Democrat in the governor's office, will have to back Maura. it kind of is what it is.
Yeah, and in a way, I will say it was almost slightly refreshing to not have her do all the usual things that candidates do when they're exiting and trying to look especially gracious. Mike, I asked Chang-Diaz right after she and the first candidate who spoke, or actually, I'm sorry, the one candidate who she is going to be endorsing spoke right afterward to sort of praise her and talk about his vision for politics. I asked her if she thought that her inability to catch on in the Democratic primary reflected a lack of interest among Democratic primary voters, maybe the electorate as a whole, in the sort of big structural transformative change that she's saying she wanted to deliver ever since she got in the race. And her answer essentially was, no, I'm hearing everywhere that I go in Massachusetts over the course of the last year that that's what people want. But I'm curious about your take as an observer. Do people, in fact, want people who are more progressive than Maura Healey to be in the governor's office and also running the show in the legislature? Or do they like more of a moderate approach, as we've seen various politicians embody, including to some extent, as she runs, Maura Healey?
Certainly the latter, Adam.
Yeah.
Massachusetts voters have over and over again confirmed that when it comes to state politics, we want to keep things down the middle, moderate. There are reasons why the legislature is more or less dominated by moderate Democrats, why Charlie Baker, a moderate Republican, is still highly popular and probably the most popular politician in the state. Juxtapose that to how we send far left figures to Washington, D.C. quite often for the national fray. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Beacon Hill, I think most voters like the status quo, and the status quo is moderate Democrat. And you have to remember that the vast majority of votes are unenrolled. It's not Democrats. It's certainly not active Republicans. These are unenrolled voters that could go either way, and that way is the middle of the Democratic Party. And that is why Maura Healey is running the kind of economy-focused, pocketbook and family-focused campaign that she is.
Lisa, given what Mike, were you going to jump in?
Well, I was going to say, I mean,
please.
That's exactly, what we noticed covering the convention and other stuff too, is that it's less about the policies in this race and more just trying to find the candidate who can appeal to those independents and take back the corner office from Republicans. That overwhelmingly is what Democrats are looking for this cycle.
Let me ask you both, though. I've thought that maybe another factor was working against Chang-Diaz in this race, namely that Democrats had locked on to Healey back when they thought that she might run against Charlie Baker when he sought re-election for a second term. They've seen her as sort of their political savior waiting in the wings for a long time now. And it seems to me like that made it tough for Chang-Diaz to make her pitch because, she's out there running and a bunch of the Democrats who she'd like to get excited about her campaign are waiting for Healey to enter the race. So wasn't that a kind of a huge built-in challenge that she faced in this race?
Yeah, it certainly was. I think challenging the juggernaut that has been the Healey campaign, really the nascent Healey campaign before she even announced. That was always going to be very, very difficult. I think that if there was a really strong cry for a far left candidate in Massachusetts, which we already discussed that there really isn't, things might have gone differently, or Healey herself might be campaigning a little bit differently. But that energy just isn't there. It's not even there in the Democratic convention like we saw in Worcester. It's not going to be in the Democratic primary electorate, and it's certainly not going to be in the statewide general electorate come November.
I don't want to go on too long here, and I want to let you guys enjoy this beautiful afternoon that we've got, but is it necessarily the case, Mike and Lisa, that energy isn't in the Democratic Party right now, or is it maybe there but manifesting itself in other races? I mean, I'm thinking, for example, of Tanisha Sullivan challenging Bill Galvin. We'll see how that race unfolds, but that seems to me to be a race where you've got at least some preliminary indication that a bunch of Democrats like her more aggressive, more progressive approach, or are excited about it at least. So is it possible that maybe the lefty energy isn't there in the race for governor, but is there in other contests? Lisa, you should take a crack at this.
I think that's actually what Sonia Chang-Díaz is setting out to prove right now by backing these candidates in certain down ballot races. I mean, you have Ricardo Arroyo, Rasan Hall, progressives who are running for county district attorney. Those are really the exact thing that she's trying to prove, is that yes, this energy is there. And now that she's marshaling the supporters and resources that she does have to help these candidates, that's the test that we're going to see in these September primaries and then in November of where the electorate is on this.
Right. It's like a mini Bernie movement, the way Sanders kind of transitioned his campaign at the presidential level into a movement, which is the word Chang-Diaz was using, to promote other, kind of far left politicians and causes.
Before we wrap up, ordinarily, I just try to end it cleanly after talking too much and maybe not letting you guys talk enough. But is there anything that we've missed here? Any important points raised by Chang-Diaz's candidacy or the state of the race right now? Anything we should touch on before we go?
Yeah, as far as the state of the race right now, I'm personally paying attention in my reporting and writing and how she's going to conduct herself as governor. I know it is a little unfair to the Republicans in this race to jump to that conclusion. The numbers and the polling and the precedent all suggest that she's going to be the Commonwealth's chief executive come January. How is she going to do that? What kind of things is she going to bring into? Is her campaign explaining that well enough for voters right now? It's a little bit, without a Democratic primary now, it's a little bit less about who, and now it's a lot more about what and how she's going to conduct the government. So personally, I want to know names for secretaries. I want to know appointments. I want to know if she wants to restructure the MBTA board. I want to know, all of these different things. Again, yeah, it's jumping to a conclusion during a political season. That's not the smartest thing to do. But when there's so much going on in this government that she's going to be in charge of and inheriting, I think it's early enough to start looking at those types of questions.
Is Maura Healey going to be answering any of those questions or even offering hints? Or is she just going to, play this very straight, matter-of-factly, I'm not going to act like I'm the nominee or the governor until I am in fact the nominee or the governor? What do you think?
Well, she did roll out a policy this morning before Sonia made her announcement expanding certain tax credits. But so far, her campaign has been light on policy. But I've heard the exact same thing from sources of mine today and activists that they want to know, especially with the state right now threatening a takeover of Boston Public Schools, what Maura Healey is going to do with the education department. So she hasn't answered for a lot of these questions yet, but there's going to be increased pressure on her to do so now.
And the T, as Mike mentioned, which is in this horrible state, and I haven't heard her weigh in on that either. Maybe I've missed it. Lisa Kashinsky, Mike Deehan, thank you. Next time, let's try to do this outside if we can make that work. We're still trying to figure that out, but all right, maybe with a cold drink in hand. So guys, thanks again. Thanks to everyone for watching. We will see you next time.